Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, so we've got the syllabus for PHO 101, Professional Photography Mastery. Our job is to just distill it, get to the core concepts. We're not talking about where the shutter button is. This is about, that leap from just snapping photos to creating a serious visual craft.
Exactly. The whole mission here is to find that shift, right? The shift from taking pictures to intentionally making an image. And what's really interesting about this curriculum is that it's the prerequisite for V201. That's the cinematography course.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it basically confirms that to master motion, you absolutely have to master the still image first. It's the bedrock.
Okay, let's unpack it then. I think we can break it down into, three main pillars. First, the super technical foundation, then the art of it all, composition and light, and finally, what feels like the most important part, the human element.
Let's start with the science. Module 1, the exposure triangle. It's really just controlling light in 3 different ways.
Yeah.
You've got aperture, which is all about your depth of field, how much of the image is sharp.
The blurry background thing, that's the one. Then shutter speed is purely for motion, freezing it or blurring it. And ISO, that one gets misunderstood. It's really about the signals-to-noise ratio of your sensor.
And dynamic range, right?
Yes, exactly. A better sensor means you can push a high ISO without getting all that grainy noise in your shadows when you're editing later. It's just physics.
And that brings us to the gear, to the glass itself. The syllabus puts a huge focus on optics, and not just field of view, like how wide the shot is, but this idea of compression.
Ah, yeah.
That's that telephoto lens trick, isn't it? Where the background looks like it's pulled in right behind the subject.
It's such a powerful effect. It totally changes the spatial relationship between things. And you have to know your lens, its flaws too.
Like chromatic aberration.
Yep, that ugly purple fringing you see on high contrast edges. And then there's the good stuff, like bokeh, how smooth your out of focus areas look. The pros know how to use the good and hide the bad.
Okay, let's shift gears to the art. This is where we go way beyond the rule of thirds. The syllabus talks about the golden ratio, dynamic symmetry.
It's advanced geometry.
It's not just putting a person on a grid line. It's about using diagonals and angles to create energy and guide the viewer's eye through the frame.
And if composition is the map for the eye, then light is the medium you're painting with. You have to master its quality. Is it hard light with sharp shadows, or is it soft with really gentle transitions?
And its direction, its intensity.
Right. And the industry standard, the three-point lighting setup, it basically solves everything. You have your key light for illumination, your fill to control shadows, and a rim light to separate the subject from the background.
So that brings us to the human element. This feels like it's pure applied psychology, especially for portraits. The syllabus mentions these masculine versus feminine posing paradigms.
It's just a visual language, really. A so-called masculine pose is about stability weight on both feet, square shoulders, right angles. It reads as structured. Whereas a feminine pose emphasizes curves, shifting weight, creating negative space. It's more about flow.
And once you have the pose, use spatial angles. Broad lighting versus short lighting.
Yeah, broad lighting hits the side of the face closer to the camera, which can make a face look fuller. Short lighting hits the far side, which is more slimming, more dramatic. But the real skill is directing the subject, building rapport fast, and using specific words to get the emotion you need.
And there was that group posing trick in there, arranging heads in triangles.
Always. It creates visual balance.
So last part, the digital darkroom, the workflow. You have to get the file formats, RAW versus JPEG. It's all about bit depth, right?
It is. It's about how much color and tonal information you've actually captured. RAW gives you, just exponentially more to work with for things like professional color grading.
And speed is critical. The syllabus stresses choosing your best shots really, really fast.
You have to be ruthless, then you move on. Global adjustments like curves, then the fine-tuning. Local adjustments, that's your dodging and burning, your masking. You're basically painting with light, just like they did in the old physical darkrooms.
So when you boil it all down, mastering an image is this: synthesis. You need the hard physics of exposure, the artistic theory of composition, and then this sort of soft skill of directing people. You can't be great without all 3.
Absolutely. And that brings up a final thought for you to consider. Given how much this curriculum focuses on posture, on emotion, on building rapport, it makes you wonder how much of mastering the still image is really about controlling everything that happens before you even press the shutter button.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before you even think about touching a dial on your camera, you really have to understand the machine itself.
Exactly.
We hear that phrase all the time, photography, drawing with light. But what does that actually mean for, this modern digital thing in your hands?
Well, It means we have to start with something much, much older. The simplest physics possible, really. It's called the camera obscura.
Which is just Latin for darkroom, right?
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting. Just imagine a completely dark box.
Okay.
Now, you poke one tiny little pinhole in one side. The magic is that light, which always travels in straight lines, flies through that hole, and projects the entire outside world onto the opposite wall.
But it's not perfect, is it? The image.
It's upside down and reversed, always. What's so fascinating is that your super advanced camera, whether it's a DSLR or mirrorless, is fundamentally just that, a very sophisticated, portable, light-tight box.
So it's just designed to control that one little burst of light, of photons that you let inside.
That's all it is.
So if the camera body is the dark room, then the canvas. Today, that's the digital sensor, not film anymore.
Exactly. We've replaced that old chemical plastic with a silicon wafer. And this sensor is made of millions of tiny photosites. We call them pixels.
Right, pixels.
And a really good analogy is to think of them as literal buckets, tiny buckets collecting photons or particles of light.
So a bright spot in my photo just means that bucket is overflowing with photons, and a dark spot means the bucket is, what, nearly empty?
You've got it. It's that simple.
Okay, but hold on. If it's just counting photons, that sounds... I mean, there have to be a limit, right? Where does that bucket analogy break down?
That's a great question because the analogy holds up completely. The limit isn't the physics, it's the physical size of the bucket.
Ah, I see.
This is why sensor size is so crucial. You hear photographers talk about full frame all the time.
That's the big professional standard, the 35mm equivalent.
It is because those sensors are physically larger. The buckets, the pixels are bigger, so they can gather significantly more light with less noise.
But if I'm just starting out, do I really need that? Or am I just paying a huge premium for a tiny difference?
That is the critical takeaway. You need full frame if you're shooting, say, concerts in a dark club or doing massive landscape prints. If not, you are often paying for a light gathering capability you might never actually use.
So the smaller ones, the APS-C or crop sensors, are perfectly fine.
They're highly effective. But remember, because the sensor is physically smaller, it crops the image. It makes your lenses look more zoomed in.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. For decades, the king of cameras was the DSLR. I love that sound, you know? The mechanical clack, clack.
Oh, yeah. That was the sound of a physical mirror slapping up and out of the way so light could finally hit the sensor.
It's so satisfying.
Well, that sound is basically history for most pros now.
Yeah.
The whole industry has moved to mirrorless.
Right, no mirror.
No mirror, no clack, clack. The light goes straight from the lens to the sensor. And what you see in the viewfinder is a real-time digital feed from that sensor.
And this is the bottom line for you. The person actually taking the picture. It's all about WYCZ-YG.
What you see is what you get.
Exactly. With a mirrorless camera, if your settings are wrong, if it's too dark, your viewfinder goes dark. You see the mistake before you press the shutter? That's a huge deal for learning fast.
It's a total game changer. So, to summarize this whole deep dive, right, your camera is a light-tight box.
The camera obscura.
Your sensor is just counting photons. Full frame is the pro standard for gathering more of those photons, but mirrorless. Mirrorless is what gives you that instant preview of your final image.
Fantastic. So we understand the box and we understand the canvas.
And now that we know the sensor is just counting the light we let in, the next crucial step is learning how we control that flow. Because changing the size of that hole, the aperture, doesn't just change the brightness. It changes what your viewer focuses on.
That's how we turn the physics into art.
That's it. And that is the very first pillar of the exposure triangle we need you to master next.
Okay, let's dive in. We're going to unpack maybe the most important part of photography, aperture.
For sure. It's the first pillar of the exposure triangle for a reason.
Right. And we're not just talking about the mechanics, you know, the little iris inside your lens. We want to get into how f-stops really become your main creative tool.
Exactly. I mean, everyone sort of gets the basic idea. It's like the pupil of the camera's eye controlling light. But where people get stuck, and I see this all the time, is the measurement. It's so confusing.
It's completely counterintuitive. Someone tells you that a tiny number, like f1.8, means the opening is huge.
And a big number, like f22, means it's a tiny pinhole.
Yeah, it feels totally backward.
It does. But once you just accept it, the rule is, well, it's golden. A lower f-stop number means a larger opening, more light.
And that's why they call certain lenses fast, right?
That's it, exactly. A lens that can open up to f1.4, f2.8 is fast because it lets in so much light that you can use a faster shutter speed, even when it's dark.
So the real magic isn't just about brightness then. The money you spend on that fast lens unlocks something else.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting. It's what the aperture does to the focus of your image.
The depth of field.
Or is it about depth of field or DOE? It's basically the slice of your image that's perfectly sharp.
Yeah.
The aperture decides how thick or thin that slice is.
And if you want that look, the one, that creamy, blurry background where the subject just pops.
It's shallow depth of field. For that, you absolutely have to use those wide open apertures.
Like in a portrait.
A portrait is the perfect example. Imagine this, scenario A. You're shooting a CEO in their office, but the office is a total mess. Papers everywhere, it's distracting.
Right.
You open your lens up wide to something like f1.8. Now only the CEO is sharp. The background just melts away into a blur. You're forcing the viewer's eye right where you want it.
You're essentially erasing the noisy background.
You are. That narrow plane of focus is a tool for directing attention.
Okay, so what if you want the total opposite? The background is actually the point of the story, like a huge landscape.
Perfect. Scenario B. You're shooting a massive mountain range. You wanted the rock in the foreground to be sharp, the river in the middle to be sharp, and the mountains way in the back to be sharp.
You need everything in focus.
Which means you need a deep depth of field. And for that, you do the opposite. You use a much smaller opening, like f11 or even f16. You stop down the lens. If you shot that landscape at f1.8,
the mountains would just be a fuzzy blob.
A complete blur. So the choice of aperture is really about managing the story you're telling. You're deciding which details matter and which ones are just noise.
So if you're listening, the takeaway here is that your f-stop isn't just a technical setting for light.
Not at all. It's an editorial choice. The ultimate power's aperture isn't just about capturing light. It's about deciding what the viewer is allowed to see. And, maybe more importantly, what context they're forced to ignore so they can focus only on what you've decided is the subject. Welcome to the deep dive. So we are jumping right back into the exposure triangle.
Yep, and we're zeroing in on that second critical piece of the puzzle.
Shutter speed. Last time we talked about aperture being like the camera's pupil, controlling how much light gets in. So what's the shutter?
Well, the analogy just continues perfectly. If the aperture is the pupil, the shutter is the camera's eyelid.
Okay, an eyelid.
It's a physical curtain right in front of the sensor, and it controls the duration, how long that eye stays open. And our whole mission today is to understand how that duration gives you, the photographer, absolute control over motion.
Control over motion. Okay, let's unpack this. So when we use a really fast speed, say 11,000th of a second.
Exactly. That little curtain just snaps open and shut almost instantly.
And that's how you get that famous statue look, right? You're basically slicing one tiny millisecond out of reality.
You are. Think about freezing an Olympic sprinter mid-stride. Or a hummingbird's wings just perfectly static in the air. It feels like you're cheating time.
Yeah, it does. But there's a catch, isn't there? Physics always has a catch.
There's always a catch. You're only letting light in for a tiny, tiny fraction of a second.
Right. So we've basically starved the sensor of light.
Yep.
If I want that frozen action shot, I have to find a way to compensate.
Yeah, ew. That usually means you either need really bright sunlight or you have to open your aperture super wide, like to f2.8, just to gather enough photons in that fleeting moment.
You're trading light for speed.
That's the trade-off. Every single time.
Okay, so let's flip that artistic goal completely, because, this is where you get those really dreamy images. Let's talk about the flow look.
Slow shutter speeds.
Yeah, like a full second, maybe even 5 seconds.
This is how you show the passage of time in a still image. The classic example, and it's classic for a reason, is the waterfall. You put your camera on a tripod, you set the exposure for 1 second, and all that moving water turns into this soft, silky, almost milky texture.
While the rocks around it stay perfectly sharp.
Perfectly sharp. It's a beautiful contrast.
But hold on, you've just created the exact opposite problem.
Right.
If I leave the shutter open for 5 seconds on a normal day, the sensors could be completely swamped with light.
It would be. You'd just get a pure, featureless, white photo. Ruined.
So how do you earn that time?
You have to choke the light source. You almost always have to close down your aperture significantly. We're talking f16, sometimes even f22, a tiny pinhole.
So you're reducing the flow of light to just a trickle.
An absolute trickle. So you can hold that curtain open long enough to paint with the motion.
Speaking of holding things, this leads us right into the practical danger zone.
Uh-oh.
What happens when your artistic goal of, say, a 1-second exposure meets your very shaky human body?
Camera shake, that's what happens. If your shutter speed is too slow, and too slow can be anything under about 160th of a second.
Yeah.
The natural vibrations from your hands, your breathing, even your heartbeat, they all register as blur. And that's not artistic blur.
No, that's just a blurry, ruined photo. I learned this the hard way inside, trying to take a portrait at 130th. Look, I took it during an earthquake.
We've all been there. And that's why you have to remember the one big safety net.
The reciprocal rule.
The reciprocal rule, it's vital. It just states that your shutter speed should never be slower than your focal length.
So if I'm zoomed in at 200 millimeter,
your minimum speed for a sharp handheld shot is 1/1200th of a second. No slower. If you need to go slower for that silky waterfall,
you have to use a tripod.
You must use a tripod. That part is non-negotiable.
So, okay, let's wrap this up. The 4 key takeaways are: shutter speed is duration.
Correct.
Fast speeds freeze action, but they starve you of light. Slow speeds create that motion blur, but they flood you with light.
Right. And too slow, handheld, just equals a shaky mess.
A shaky mess.
So if you put this together with what we know about Aperture, you now have 2 incredibly powerful ways to define the reality of your image. Aperture controls depth of field, and now shutter speed controls motion.
And that raises the big question, doesn't it?
It does. Since changing, either one messes with the amount of light, how do you manage to get the artistic look you want, frozen or flowing, while still making sure the photo isn't just pure black or pure white? How do you balance all 3?
And navigating that constant balancing act.
Well, that's the true art of the exposure triangle. Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're finally going to complete it.
The exposure triangle.
The exposure triangle, yeah. We've managed the flow of light with Aperture, we've controlled time with shutter speed, and now we arrive at, well, the 3rd pillar.
The one everyone's a bit scared of.
Exactly. The setting our sources all call the most dangerous one to touch. ISO. Our mission is to figure out what it actually does.
And why it's considered the ultimate photographic trade-off.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay, so ISO. The letters stand for International Organization for Standardization. But you can forget that. It's not important.
Right.
Functionally, it just measures the sensitivity of your camera's sensor to light. It's like an electronic boost button.
Electronic boost. Okay, so when you raise that number, you're telling the camera to just amplify the light signal it's getting.
That's it. You're making the image brighter electronically.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's this analogy from the sources that I think is perfect for audio learners. Think of your sensor as a microphone, and think of light as sound. But I have to ask, is boosting an electrical signal from a sensor really the same as amplifying audio?
In its consequence, it's identical.
Okay.
So a low ISO, your base setting, usually 100 or sometimes 64.
Right, the lowest it can go.
That's like you speaking normally into a mic with the amplifier set low.
Mm-hmm.
The signal is strong, it's pure, it's clean.
You get a perfect, rich image.
Exactly. But when the light gets scarce, you have to hike the ISO up, let's say, to 6400.
Because you need that electronic boost just to register an image at all.
Right. And in our analogy, that's like turning the amplifier way, way up to hear a faint whisper in a dark room.
You hear the voice, sure, but what else do you get? You get that loud, unavoidable hiss.
And that hiss is exactly what we call digital noise or grain.
So it's not actually part of the original image?
Not at all. It's just random electronic interference that happens when you push the sensor's voltage that hard.
Okay, so the fundamental balancing act here is what they call the signal-to-noise ratio. You want to maximize the signal, the actual light information, and minimize the noise, the interference.
Which is why the professional rule is simple. Stick to the lowest base ISO possible. Keep that signal pure.
But the noise is only half the cost, isn't it?
It is. The sources say the real invisible consequence, the one people forget, is how high ISO just obliterates your dynamic range.
Okay, and just to remind everyone, dynamic range is the total separation you can capture between the darkest shadow and the brightest highlight.
Exactly. And the numbers here are frankly shocking. At base ISO 100, you might capture, say, 14 stops of dynamic range.
That's huge. That means you have rich detail in every single tonal area.
Everywhere. But when you push that amplification to something like ISO 12,800, that range can drop to just 8 stops.
Wait, you lose 6 stops of potential detail?
Gone. Just vanished. And what you're left with is muddy, flat shadows and highlights that are just instantly blown out, colorless.
So if high ISO introduces noise and destroys dynamic range, why would anyone ever touch it?
One word.
Necessity.
Necessity. It really is the mother of all ISO decisions.
I remember shooting a concert in this really dingy club once. I couldn't slow the shutter speed. The singer was moving. The lens was already wide open.
They were out of options.
Completely. My only choice was to crank the ISO. I think I went to 25,600. The photo looked like it was shot through a salt shaker, but I got the shot.
And that's the whole point. A noisy photo is always better than a blurry photo.
Or a black photo.
Or no photo at all. Which brings us right back to the foundational rule.
You always set your aperture and shutter speed first.
Always. You set them based on your creative needs, your depth of field, your motion control, and you only use ISO.
As the absolute last resort to get a balanced exposure.
Exactly.
Okay, so to summarize this for you, ISO is just amplification. And it doesn't matter if it's sound or light. That amplification always comes at a measurable cost to clarity and the quality of your image.
Right. And this raises an important question for you to consider. Since we know high ISO kills dynamic range, it crushes the detail in the shadows and the highlights, how might understanding that trade-off, how might that influence your decision to use supplemental lighting, like a flash, before you ever even think about touching that ISO dial again? Okay, let's dive in. We need to talk about this fundamental flaw that's at the core of pretty much every camera ever made.
The light meter.
The light meter. It's supposed to get your exposure right, but it can fail so spectacularly sometimes. We're going to get into why your camera's basically lying to you.
And the interesting thing is, it's not really a malfunction. It's a design choice. It's built on a compromise, and that's what we call the problem of 18% gray.
18% gray. So the camera just assumes everything in the world should be this one specific shade of gray.
Exactly. It thinks every single scene, whether it's a dark coal mine or a bright sunny beach, should reflect 18% of the light.
And that number, that's not just random, is it?
No, it was statistically determined. They basically figured out that if you average out everything on Earth, it comes to about 18% reflectance. It works most of the time.
But when it fails, it really fails.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about the classic snowman scenario. You're shooting a pure white snowman, bright white snow everywhere. What does the camera do?
It panics. It sees all that brightness and thinks, whoa, this is way too bright. I need to darken this down to my comfortable middle gray.
And you end up with that disgusting, slushy-looking gray snow.
It's trying to turn white into gray, and it does the opposite for dark scenes, right? The classic black cat in a coal mine example.
Right. It sees all that black and thinks it's too dark.
I've got to brighten this up. And suddenly your black cat is a washed-out gray cat.
So the mission here, for you listening, is to know when to just ignore what your camera's telling you. But before we get to the tools, let's talk about the one source of truth. Because you can't trust the screen on the back, right?
Absolutely not. The screen lies. It's too bright when you're inside, too dim in the sun. It's just a preview. The real data, the objective truth, is the histogram.
The graph, that little mountain range.
Yeah.
So if the histogram is the judge, then the metering modes are just our way of trying to get the exposure right in the first place.
They're our first attempt, yeah.
So what are the main two?
Well, the default is called evaluative or matrix metering. It's pretty smart, actually. It looks at the whole scene and makes an educated guess. It works, I'd say, 80% of the time.
Okay, but if it works 80% of the time, what's the risk? Why not just stick with that?
Because that 20% can be a complete disaster. That's when you need spot metering. This mode measures light from just one tiny little pinpoint. It ignores everything else.
Oh, this is perfect for like a singer on a dark stage with one bright spotlight on them.
Exactly. Perfect example. If you used matrix, the camera would see all that black, try to brighten it, and the singer's face would be completely blown out, just pure white.
But with spot metering, you can put that little point right on their cheek.
And the camera exposes for their skin perfectly. It ignores all the surrounding darkness. It's about isolating what's important.
So after you've used your meter and taken the shot, we go back to that graph of truth, the histogram. How do we read it?
It's simple, really. The far left side is pure black, the shadows. The far right side is pure white, the highlights. Everything in between is your midtones.
And you just want to see a nice little mountain of data somewhere in the middle.
You want it contained. The danger is what we call clipping. That's when the graph slams hard into either wall.
Right. So if it hits the right wall, that's clipped highlights. So say the detail in a white wedding dress, it's just gone.
Gone forever. It's not data anymore. It's just a white blob. Even the best editing software can't get it back. There's nothing there to recover.
And if it hits the left wall?
Same thing, but for shadows. We call it crushed blacks. All the detail in a dark suit or in the woods at night just becomes a flat, featureless patch of black.
So the big takeaway is Your metering mode helps you get close, but the histogram is the only thing that tells you if your data is actually safe.
That is the final judge. And a great way to put this into practice is the snow trick. Since we know the camera wants to make white things gray,
You have to fight it.
you have to manually overexpose. Tell your camera to be brighter by, say, +1 or +2 stops. That pushes the histogram to the right and keeps your snow looking like actual snow.
Which, I think, leaves us with a great final thought for everyone to chew on. What other tools are you trusting in your life that, like that camera screen, might just be showing you a pretty presentation instead of the hard data?
It's all about knowing what to trust. Rely on the objective data, not just what looks good on the surface. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to leave the camera body on the shelf and talk about the part that, well, really makes the magic happen.
We're talking about the glass.
The glass, exactly.
Right.
We are unpacking a really essential concept: focal lengths.
Mm-hmm. And it's that single number on your lens that basically determines how you see the world through your camera.
It seems so simple, just a number in millimeters.
It does, but that number dictates two huge things for you. First is the angle of view, so how much stuff you can actually fit in the frame.
And the second is magnification, right? How close everything appears.
Exactly. And photographers have kind of organized these numbers into three main zones.
Okay, let's break those down. First up is wide angle.
Right, so think roughly 14 millimeter up to about 35 millimeter. This gives you that huge expansive view. It pulls you in, but it also really exaggerates distance. Things in the background feel much farther away.
Then we get to the middle ground, the standard lens.
Yeah, your classic 50 millimeter. The nifty 50, as they call it.
Ah, everyone loves the nifty 50.
They do, and for good reason. The 50 millimeter is so important because it's our baseline. It's the closest we can get to just, normal human vision.
So it's the most honest view. No real tricks.
That's a great way to put it. It's neutral. And then, from there, we jump to the other extreme, telephoto.
This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. We're talking 85 millimeter and then way, way up past 600 millimeter. It's like looking through a telescope, and this is where you find the photographer's secret weapon.
Let me guess. You're talking about compression.
I'm talking about compression. It's probably the most artistic and maybe misunderstood tool in your entire kit.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What actually is compression?
It's an optical illusion, really.
Yeah.
It visually squashes the distance between your subject in the foreground and whatever's in the background. It pulls them together.
Let's use an example. I think that makes it clearer.
Perfect. So imagine a person standing in a field, and there's a huge mountain range, like 5 miles behind them.
Okay, got it.
If you shoot that with a wide 24 millimeter lens, those mountains are going to look like tiny little bumps on the horizon. The scene feels empty. Vast.
Right, because the wide angle expands that sense of distance.
But now, switch to a 200 millimeter telephoto. To keep the person the same size in your frame, you have to physically walk way, way back.
And what does that do to the mountains?
Because the lens is so magnified that 5 miles of empty space looks more like 5 feet. The mountains suddenly look enormous. They're looming right behind your subject's head.
Wow, so the lens has compressed that 5-mile gap.
It has. It makes the background feel intimate and dramatic, not distant.
And that same idea applies up close, too. This is where it gets really important for you if you, take pictures of people.
Oh, absolutely. We've all seen those unflattering selfies taken with a wide-angle lens, right?
Carnival mirror effect.
That's it. A wide lens, like a 24 millimeter, held too close, will distort a face. It makes the nose or the forehead look way too big. It's not good looking.
So for a professional portrait, you'd never use that?
Never. A pro's going to reach for a longer lens, maybe an 85 millimeter or 135 millimeter, specifically to use that compression to their advantage.
To make the person look better.
Exactly. That little bit of compression actually flattens the facial features just enough to make them look more proportional, more, flattering. It smooths out that distortion.
So let's boil this all down into a takeaway for your camera bag. There's an inverse relationship here.
There is. Low number, like 24 millimeter, means a wide view. It expands space, but it distorts faces up close.
And a high number, like 200 millimeter, gives you a narrow, zoomed-in view. It powerfully compresses space, and it makes faces look great in portrait.
The lens isn't just capturing a scene. It's actively manipulating depth, distance, and dimension.
Which brings up a final thought to chew on. If a telephoto lens creates this dramatic compression and a wide angle creates this exaggerated space, is the 50 millimeter lens truly more honest because it's like our own eyes?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Or is every photo, even a normal one, just a deliberate choice about which emotional truth you want to show? All right, so today we are doing a deep dive into the world of optics. We're going to tackle that big debate, the one that really splits photographers. Prime lenses versus zoom lenses.
The great debate.
Exactly. Our mission today is pretty simple. Let's just cut through the noise and get to the core of it all.
Yeah, and I think to start, we just need a really clear definition, right?
The absolute basics.
So a prime lens is, well, it's fixed. It has one single focal length, say 85 millimeters, and that's it.
No zooming in or out.
None. A zoom lens, on the other hand, gives you that variable range, like the classic 4 to 70 millimeter. And that one difference really defines everything else that follows.
Okay, so let's start with primes. The kings of quality, as some people call them. The big non-negotiable advantage has to be light capture, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The aperture.
Yeah, we're talking apertures of f1.2, maybe f1.4, which is just incredible for working in low light and, of course, for getting that beautiful background separation.
That bokeh. It's what everyone is chasing, especially in portraiture. And they are just intrinsically sharper. The glass is optimized for that one single job, that one angle.
It's a simpler design.
Exactly. It's a kind of optical purity you just can't get with all the moving parts in a zoom.
But that purity, well, it comes at a cost, right? I mean, the big one is just pure inconvenience.
For sure. You have to zoom with your feet, as they say.
And I've heard so many pros say they've missed the shot simply because they were fumbling to swap lenses.
That's the entire trade-off. In a fast-paced environment like a wedding or a sports match, that can be a deal breaker. You miss the moment.
So that brings us to the other side, the zoom lens. If a prime lens demands discipline and a controlled environment, the zoom offers
What?
total versatility.
Immediate versatility. That's the key phrase. You can go from a wide group shot to a tight portrait without moving your feet at all.
Which is indispensable for something like journalism or events.
Or wildlife, yeah. Anywhere you can't control the action or the subject.
Okay, but we know that versatility comes with its own trade-offs. What exactly are we giving up when we choose that flexibility?
Well, the big one is aperture speed. Most professional zooms, they top out at f2.8.
Which is still quite fast, but it's not f1.4 fast.
Not at all. It's a full stop or two of light you're losing there. And then there's the weight and the complexity. I mean, all those internal mechanics needed for zooming. It makes the lenses heavier, and often it introduces tiny optical imperfections that a fixed prime just avoids.
You know, that brings up a really fascinating piece of professional trivia.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity. For any dedicated zoom shooter, it's those 3 standard f2.8 lenses that define their whole kit, right?
That's it. The 16 to 35 millimeter for wide shots, the 24 to 70 for general purpose, and the 70 to 200 for telephoto. With those 3, you can cover pretty much any scenario.
It's a philosophy of coverage over absolute speed.
So if you synthesize all this, it really becomes a philosophical choice.
Quality versus convenience.
Pretty much. Primes offer you that superior quality and unmatched light capture at, say, f1.4, but they demand you slow down and control the scene. Zooms. They give you superior versatility and convenience, but you have to accept that you're working with a slower maximum aperture, like f2.8.
So for you, the person listening and planning a shoot, the choice just hinges entirely on your environment.
Exactly.
If you're doing portraits, studio work, or some other kind of controlled art.
You'd probably reach for a prime. The quality is paramount.
But if you're at an event where everything is chaos and unpredictable,
a zoom is your best friend. The priority there is capturing the moment, not missing it. So at the end of the day, this debate isn't really about which lens is technically better. It's about which constraint you're willing to work with. The constraint of fixed mobility versus the constraint of limited light.
Which one matters most for the kind of image you're trying to create in that situation? And that leaves us with a pretty interesting final thought, doesn't it? When you look at a really famous, powerful photograph, think about how much of its perceived quality is determined not by the camera, but by that simple choice the photographer made. The choice between fixed discipline or flexible versatility. Something for you to explore as you consider the tools of visual storytelling.
Welcome to the deep dive. So when we talk about camera lenses, we often get stuck on the really sterile specs, focal length, aperture, all that.
It's a math.
Exactly, the math. But today we want to move past that and get into the actual character of the glass.
Yeah.
Think of it less like a scientific tool and more like a painter's brush.
That's a perfect way to put it. Our mission here is to sort of unpack how the inherent flaws, because every single lens is flawed, aren't just defects.
Right.
They're often the very things that give a lens its unique aesthetic. We're looking for the beauty and the breakage, so to speak.
Okay, I like that. So let's unpack that, starting with geometry, or I guess how lenses fail at geometry. Distortion. We have the two main types, right? The first one is barrel distortion. That's where straight lines seem to bulge outwards. You see it all the time in wide-angle lenses.
And then you have the complete opposite, pincushion distortion, where those same lines bow inward. That's more of a telephoto lens thing.
And software can fix this now, right? You just click a button in Lightroom.
It can. But here's the thing people forget. When you tell the software to fix it, you're just digitally stretching or squeezing pixels to force those lines straight.
Ah, so you're losing detail.
You're sacrificing sharpness, especially out at the edges. So that perfectly corrected image is often, technically less perfect than the original. A real trade-off.
Okay, that's a great point. So from bending shapes, let's move on to splitting light, chromatic aberration, color fringing.
Yeah.
I always notice this on like tree branches against a really bright white sky. You get that weird purple or green outline. Is there a reason it's always those colors?
That's a fantastic question, and it goes right to the core of the physics. It happens because different wavelengths of light, different colors, they just don't bend at the exact same speed when they pass through glass.
Okay.
So red and blue light, which are at the opposite ends of the spectrum, are the hardest for a simple lens to focus on the same exact point. That purple and green fringe you're seeing, that's just the leftover colors the lens couldn't quite line up.
So the expensive APO lenses are designed specifically to fix that misalignment.
Exactly. They use special glass to force all those colors to land in the same spot.
So if that's a flaw we spend a ton of money to fix,
Yeah.
let's talk about a flaw we actively seek out, bokeh, the aesthetic of blur.
Yes.
And it's so important to stress we're talking about the quality of the blur, not just how blurry the background is.
Precisely. You can have that really sought-after creamy bokeh where everything just melts away beautifully.
Yeah.
But you can also get what people call nervous bokeh.
And that's where the background looks kind of jagged or busy. It's really distracting.
Super distracting. And what determines that quality isn't random. It's a direct result of the mechanics inside the lens, specifically the number of aperture blades.
And the more blades you have, something like 9 or 11, the rounder the actual opening stays as you stop down.
You got it. A rounder aperture creates those smooth, circular, out-of-focus highlights. That's what gives you that creamy look that portrait photographers absolutely love. It's an intentional design choice.
All right, last one. Let's talk about the ultimate artistic signature, or mess, depending on how you see it. Lens flare.
Ah, flare. A masterclass in duality.
How so?
Well, the bad flare is what happens when your image just gets washed out. It looks hazy, and the contrast completely tanks.
But the good flare, that's an artistic tool. I'm thinking of someone like J.J. Abrams, who uses those anamorphic lens flares, those horizontal streaks, all the time.
He absolutely does. He uses that imperfection on purpose to inject energy and a sort of hyper-reality into a scene. It's part of his visual language.
Yeah.
And really, when you get down to it, the most iconic images aren't made with the most sterile, mathematically perfect lenses. They're made with lenses that have a bit of that human error, that character. That's what makes an image feel memorable instead of just clinical.
So with all that in mind, here's a thought for you to take away. Of all these optical flaws we talked about today, distortion, color fringing, or flare, which one would you intentionally choose for a project to use its specific character to make your work better? Something to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to move past just hitting the autofocus button and hoping for the best.
Right. We're looking at how you can actually tell the camera how to focus.
And we're going to get into one specific trick that pros use to, lock focus and then totally recompose the shot without losing that critical sharpness.
Exactly. Our sources really lay out a roadmap for this. The whole mission here is to distill the core modes, understand the focus areas, and then unlock that pro technique.
Okay, let's start with the absolute foundation. When you pick up a camera, you basically see two modes, AFS and AFC.
Single and continuous, and this is the first big choice you have to make. It dictates everything.
So let's start with the simpler one, AFS, single shot.
AFS is like a simple contract with your camera. You
Right.
half press the shutter, it finds focus, you probably hear a little beep.
And it's locked.
It's locked. It will not change no matter what your subject does until you lift your finger and start over. It's perfect for things that don't move.
Like landscapes, maybe a posed portrait.
Posed portraits, architecture, statues. Anything static where you need that focus to be absolutely consistent, shot after shot.
But what happens when your subject doesn't stay still? You're trying to photograph a kid running around or...
Or wildlife.
Right. And the second they move, that locked focus point is suddenly pointing at the background.
And that's the exact failure point. That's why you immediately need to switch to AFC, continuous.
Okay, so what does continuous do differently?
It completely flips the logic. Instead of locking, the camera acquires focus and then it just keeps tracking. It uses predictive algorithms to follow the subject as they move closer or further away.
As long as you keep the shutter half pressed.
Exactly. You hold it down, it keeps working. It's absolutely essential for sports, wildlife, any kind of action.
Okay, so that tells us if the camera should track. Now we need to talk about where it should be looking.
The precision. This is about control. And the most control you can possibly have is single point.
So that's that one tiny little box you can move around in the viewfinder.
You are telling the camera, focus right here and nowhere else. For a portrait, you'd put that little box right on the subject's eye.
It's super precise, but I imagine it's also really hard to keep on a moving target.
It can be maddening, which is why there's a kind of safety net built in.
Which would be zone focus.
Exactly. Instead of one tiny point, zone gives the camera a small cluster of points, like a 3x3 grid. You still control the general area, but the camera has some wiggle room inside that zone.
So for a bird flying across the sky, you just have to keep it inside that bigger box, not on one specific pixel.
And your hit rate goes way, way up. It's a lifesaver for fast, erratic subjects.
And this all leads to the kind of the modern revolution in focusing, especially with mirrorless cameras.
IAF.
This has been a game changer.
It's a total game changer. It's essentially AI doing all that hard work for you. The camera scans the frame, it finds a human or an animal eye, and it just latches on.
So you don't even have to place the little box anymore.
Nope. It just finds it. This frees you up to think purely about your composition and your timing. It's huge for portraiture.
Okay, so we've got modes, single or continuous, and we've got areas, single point, zone, or IAF. Now for the big one, the pro technique.
Back button focus.
Most people, us included when we started, half press the shutter to focus. Pros. They often just turn that function off completely.
It's a huge workflow shift, but it's for a very good reason. They decouple the act of focusing from the act of taking the picture.
How do they do that?
They go into the camera's menu and assign the job of focusing to a different button, almost always one on the back of the camera, the AF on button.
So the shutter button only takes the picture.
That's its only job.
And what's the actual tactical advantage of doing this?
Control. It means you can press the back button with your thumb to grab focus on your subject's eye and then let go. The focus is now locked. It's stuck there.
So you can move the camera, recompose the shot however you want.
And then you can take 5, 10, 20 pictures with the shutter button, and the camera will never, ever try to refocus between shots. It separates focusing from capturing.
That separation seems to be the key. So just to recap the takeaways.
It boils down to this. AFS for still subjects. AFC for moving ones.
Use IAF for people and pets whenever you can. It just makes life easier.
And for that next level of control, give back button focus a try.
What's really interesting here is that this shows how focus systems have shifted. It's less about the camera guessing and more about the photographer making these quick, tactical decisions.
Yeah, and think about this for a second. How does separating the action of focusing, that moment you lock it down, from the action of actually capturing the image? How does that change the way you react to a perfect moment?
You're not thinking about two things at once.
You're not. You have this certainty. You know your focus is already perfect, so you can put all of your attention on that split second of timing. And that's often what turns a good shot into a truly great one.
Okay, so for today's deep dive, let's talk about composition. I mean, how do you take this huge 360-degree world of chaos around us and, cram it into a compelling little rectangle?
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole mission, isn't it? Finding some kind of structure in all that chaos. And I think the best place to start is, well, the most famous tool we have, the rule of thirds. The tic-tac-toe board.
A tic-tac-toe board? Absolutely. You just imagine it overlaid on your frame. You get 2 vertical lines, 2 horizontal ones, and boom, you have a grid.
And right away, that grid tells you the one thing not to do, which is put your main subject dead center. That's the classic amateur mistake. Right?
It is. Unless you're going for a passport photo, it just feels so static, boring.
So what's the fix?
The grid encourages you to use asymmetry. You place your primary subject on one of those vertical lines, Or maybe you put the horizon on one of the horizontal lines.
And it immediately feels more interesting.
It immediately creates a kind of visual tension. It gets the eye moving. Okay, but let's get a little more granular here. Placing things on the lines is good. But what about the actual intersections, those 4 power points, as they're called? What's so special about hitting that exact spot?
Well, that's where the real precision comes in. It's one thing to be near the line, but when you place a really crucial element like a person's eye or, a distant mountain peak right on that intersection,
It just pops.
it pops. The geometry of the frame basically forces your eye to go right there. That point becomes almost inescapable.
So if the rule of thirds is a reliable sort of structural foundation, what's next? I'm thinking of something a bit more organic, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci spiral.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating there is that it's not just an artist's trick. You see this exact pattern everywhere in nature. We're talking nautilus shells, pine cones, even entire galaxies.
So it's a completely different approach. It's not a grid anymore.
No, not at all. You're trading that rigid grid for a smooth logarithmic curve. The idea is to create a natural flow. The viewer's eye enters the frame, and it sort of follows that spiral inward.
And lands right on the subject at the end.
Lands right on the subject at the tightest point of the curve. It just feels less constructed. It feels more, I don't know, almost divine in a way.
Okay, so that's flow. But what if you want pure, raw energy? Speed, aggression. I've heard the term dynamic symmetry thrown around, and it sounds pretty complex.
It sounds academic, I know, but the core idea is actually pretty intuitive. You're just moving from squares and rectangles to triangles and, more importantly, diagonals.
Diagonals, right.
And it's not just about, tilting your camera sideways. It's a specific technique using these powerful diagonal lines that cross the entire composition to create these aggressive lines of action.
Which is why so many action movie posters feel like they're leaning, isn't it? Everything is tilted to create that sense of motion.
That is the perfect example. But here's the clever part, and this is how you stop it from just looking like chaos.
Okay.
You have to balance those aggressive diagonals with strong, stable horizontal lines in the same shot. The horizontals act as an anchor.
Ah, so you create tension. The energy of the diagonal pushing against the stability of the horizontal.
Exactly. That tension is what makes the image so compelling.
This is a phenomenal breakdown of the whole compositional toolkit. So just to sum it all up for everyone, you have the rule of thirds for reliable, solid balance.
Yep, your workhorse.
Then you have center composition, but you use that very intentionally, right? For perfect symmetry, like a Wes Anderson frame or something.
Why something spiritual, yeah.
And finally, dynamic symmetry with those diagonals, when you really want to inject that feeling of action and speed.
Right. So now that you know these geometric rules of engagement, here's a final thought for you to take away. The next time you're consuming any media, a film, a photograph, an ad, and something feels just a little bit off, ask yourself if the artist might be deliberately breaking these rules.
Yeah, what are they trying to communicate by not putting things on the grid?
Precisely. What feeling, or maybe what intentional discomfort, does that choice create when they refuse to use the PowerPoints or the diagonals? Think about that.
Okay, let's get into this. For today's deep dive, we're really going to unpack the hidden geometry of images. We're talking about the foundational rule book, how simple things like lines and angles actually dictate the psychology of what you're seeing.
That's it, exactly. It's all about visual direction. And we're going to focus on two really powerful techniques here: leading lines and then perspective, specifically the high versus the low angle. The goal here is to really understand how to give the viewer a very clear, guided experience, one that tells a specific story.
Let's start with leading lines. I have to admit, I always just saw them as, well, aesthetically pleasing, a nice winding road or fence. But the sources suggest it's much more aggressive than that. It's not just a nice view, it's practically a command, right?
It is, absolutely. What's so fascinating is this concept that the human eye is, well, it's inherently lazy. It needs a signpost. A leading line acts like a giant arrow, just pulling the viewer along a calculated path right to your main subject.
A visual highway, so to speak. But what makes a line useful versus just another random element in the shot? Does it have to go from edge to edge?
The technique is what matters. The line really has to start in the foreground, often near a corner of the frame, and then physically travel inward. This is what forces a sense of depth. It turns a flat 2D photo into something that feels like a 3D space you could step into.
You could use a road or a fence line or even like street lights going off into the distance.
Yeah, or the pattern on a tile floor, the edge of a building, even a person's arm pointing at something. If the line doesn't point at your subject, it's basically a wasted element.
Okay, so if leading lines guide us across the frame, horizontally, then perspective is what guides us vertically. It's all about assigning status
Yeah.
and where you stand. Well, it fundamentally changes the psychological weight of your subject. This is where it gets really interesting.
It really is.
Let's start with the low angle, the worm's eye view.
Right. So you're physically low to the ground looking up. The psychological result is it's immediate and it's primal. Your subject looks massive, powerful, completely dominant.
The hero shot.
That's the definition of the hero shot, yes. You look at big ad campaigns, movie posters, they almost always shoot important figures from just slightly below. CEOs, superheroes, athletes. It gives them this instant mythic scale. It communicates command.
Okay, that's the CEO playbook. So what happens when we swing to the total opposite, the bird's eye view, where we're looking down on the subject?
You completely reverse that power dynamic. If the low angle gives power, the high angle just strips it away. Instantly, the subject looks small. They look vulnerable, maybe even submissive.
Huh. And the sources point out this is used very deliberately.
Oh, very. Think about photos of children. A high angle can emphasize their innocence, their smallness. But that same angle in photojournalism might be used for, say, refugees or victims of a disaster to emphasize their powerlessness in the situation.
So that leaves the middle ground shooting at eye level.
Yeah.
That becomes the neutral zone.
Exactly. It's the point of connection. It establishes a relationship of equals. You're not looking up in awe or down in pity. You're connecting to their humanity.
Right.
And that actually brings us to the most essential takeaway for you listening at home, the checklist, if you will. It's this. Never just stand at eye level by default. The critical thing is to move. You have to squat or climb or lean in order to deliberately change the story your image is telling.
So really what this all boils down to is that composition isn't some happy accident. It's intentional. It's calculated psychological direction. Every image is steering your emotional reaction with these tools.
Lines telling you where to look and angles telling you how to feel,
Exactly.
which, raises a really important question for you to think about. We've established that just a simple change in your vertical position can assign power or vulnerability to a subject. So what unrecognized visual biases are at work in the media you're consuming every single day? That's the lens you need to use next time you see a news photo or a political ad or even just a marketing image online. What story are they telling you before you even read the caption?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to take a real shortcut into color theory for photography.
Right.
Because we're not talking about color as just, decoration. We're unpacking this idea that color is the emotional soundtrack for your image.
That's a perfect way to put it. Our mission today is to get you from just unconsciously looking at colors to consciously controlling them.
Okay.
We want to give you the technical rules, but also the aesthetic choices that really dictate the emotion of a photo. And we have to start at the source.
White balance.
Exactly. White balance.
So let's get into this. Light itself has a temperature.
Yeah.
It's measured in something called Kelvin, but you don't really need to memorize the numbers.
No, not at all. You just need to know the feeling, the spectrum.
So the extremes.
Think about the warm end. You've got candlelight, a sunset, or maybe a cozy tungsten bulb in a lamp.
And that immediately feels like nostalgia or comfort or heat.
Right. Then on the other end, the cool end, you get light from an overcast day, that deep blue hour right before sunrise, or
the dreaded fluorescent office lights.
The worst. And that feels clinical, maybe a little cold, sometimes even isolating.
Okay, so that's the science. But here's where the creative control comes in. How do we take that idea of temperature and turn it into like an emotional lever?
By tricking the camera. It's my favorite part.
Yeah?
Let's say you're in a room that's, perfectly balanced, maybe a little warm, but you want your subject to look lonely or melancholic.
You want to change the mood.
You force the camera to a much cooler white balance, so instead of correctly balancing the light, the camera washes the whole scene blue.
So you're using a technical mistake on purpose.
It's a deliberate choice to underscore the emotion. You're telling a story.
So we've set the global temperature. Now, how do we introduce intentional contrast and, drama? I guess that brings us to the color wheel.
It does. And here we're looking for complementary colors. These are the opposites on the wheel.
Like red and green.
Or yellow and purple, or the one that dominates modern cinema and advertising.
Orange and teal.
Orange and teal, it's everywhere.
They create so much energy, they make an image just pop. But the fascinating thing is why that specific pairing became the standard.
Yeah, it's actually rooted in human biology.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. Our skin tones, yours, mine, pretty much everyone's, They naturally sit in the orange and magenta range.
Okay.
So when a filmmaker wants the subject to stand out, they intentionally push the shadows or the background or the whole environment towards teal.
The exact opposite.
The exact opposite. And those two colors vibrate against each other. It instantly separates the person from the backdrop.
It's a shortcut to drama, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You can't.
But what if you want the opposite? You want peace, serenity, not conflict.
Then you move to analogous colors. These are the neighbors on the color wheel, colors that sit right next to each other.
Like green, blue, and cyan.
Exactly. Because they share a base color, they create harmony, not tension. You see these palettes in nature all the time.
Right, the greens and browns of a forest or the blues and cyans of the ocean. It creates a very restful, cohesive look for the viewer.
Which brings us to our last point, and this is maybe the most important one. Visual weight.
Okay, tell us why some colors feel heavier or more forward than others.
It has to do with how our eyes process light wavelengths. Warm colors, your reds, oranges, yellows, they have longer wavelengths and they physically appear to advance toward you.
They demand attention.
They really do. And conversely, cool colors, blues and greens, have shorter wavelengths. They recede. They fall back into the image.
So what does that mean for composing a shot?
Well, if you want your subject to instantly separate from the background, you use that principle. It's a conscious choice.
Give us the example.
Okay, put your subject in a bright red jacket, a warm advancing color,
Right.
and put them against a deep blue wall, a cool receding color. The red jumps forward, the blue pulls back, and your subject immediately has priority.
And if you put that same red jacket against a yellow wall.
They merge. Less separation. It's all about that conscious control.
So this is the practical takeaway. We've gone from controlling the whole scene's temperature with white balance, to creating conflict with complementary colors like orange and teal, to building harmony with analogous colors.
And that leads to this final realization. Understanding visual weight means you can strategically use color not just to make something look pretty, but to physically direct the viewer's eye.
You're deciding what they see first.
First, second, and last, all based on the color you assign to an object.
So color isn't passive, it's actually the director of the show. Now go back and look at those photographs you love and see if you can spot the visual choreography hiding in plain sight. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to jump into a really core part of aesthetics and composition.
Yeah.
And our mission really is to get you to the biggest insight in visual design pretty fast.
Which is that what you leave out of the frame is often way more important than what you put in.
Exactly. We're talking about negative space and visual balance.
Right, the architecture emptiness. So to start, we have to define the two main players here.
Okay.
You've got positive space. That's your subject. It's the person, the tree, whatever you're focusing on.
And then the negative space is everything else.
Everything else. The sky, a blank wall, a deep shadow. It's the breathing room around your subject.
So let's unpack that right away. Because I think the biggest mistake people make is creating a frame that is just exhausting to look at.
Cognitive overload.
Yeah, you fill the whole shot with stuff, cars, signs, trees, and you're asking way too much of the viewer's eye. Why is that so tiring?
Well, you're not giving the brain a focal point. By using massive amounts of negative space, you basically simplify the background to almost nothing.
You're giving the viewer permission to just focus on the one thing you want them to see.
Exactly. You're isolating it.
And the effect of that is, it's so dramatic. We've all seen that one shot, right? A tiny silhouette of a person way at the bottom of the frame.
And the other, 90% of the image is just a vast empty sky.
Right.
That emptiness isn't just a background. It's an active tool. It's doing something.
It's creating a feeling.
It's screaming emotion. That massive negative space conveys scale, obviously, but it also creates feelings of loneliness, maybe solitude, or just how small we are against the universe.
The empty space is what's actually carrying the emotional weight of the image.
100%.
Okay, so if we've established that negative space can create scale and feeling, how do we then use it to, balance the whole frame?
Right. So now we have to shift how we think about the frame. You need to start treating your composition like a physical scale, a seesaw.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you put a heavy subject, something big and dark on the right side, that side of the seesaw goes down. It's visually heavy.
So you need a counterweight on the left to make the viewer feel comfortable to level it out.
You do. And here's the cool part. The counterweight doesn't have to be another big, heavy thing.
So this is asymmetrical balance. You don't need a mirror image.
Exactly. You don't need perfect symmetry at all. The real insight here is that a huge, heavy subject can be perfectly balanced by something much, much smaller.
As long as that small thing has enough visual weight on its own.
Yes, and that weight can come from different things.
So a large, dark figure on one side could be balanced by what? A tiny but incredibly bright light in the opposite corner.
That's the perfect example. The sheer brightness of that tiny light gives it enough visual weight to completely counter the size of the bigger subject.
So it's not about physical size, it's about visual impact.
It's impact and density. You're using contrast size versus brightness to create a sense of harmony.
Okay, so if we boil all this down, what are the key takeaways, the actionable steps you should be thinking about?
First, just remember, less is more. Be ruthless. Simplify your backgrounds.
Get rid of the clutter.
Second, use that empty space on purpose. It's your best tool for creating feelings, whether it's grandeur or quietness. And last, give your subject breathing room. Don't crop so tight to the edges.
Okay, so we've covered that size and brightness give things visual weight. But just to leave you with a final thought to mull over, if composition really is about balancing these forces, what other elements are you not thinking about?
Right.
Consider what happens when you put a patch of intense saturated color in a black and white scene. Or what about texture?
Or implied motion. How much visual weight does a tiny but perfectly sharp and in-focus element have compared to a huge blurry shape in the background?
That's the experiment. That's the search for that perfect visual equilibrium.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, you can have the best camera, the most expensive lens, but if your lighting is flat, the whole image is just dead.
It's so true. So today, we're going to dive right into that, into the invisible architecture of, well, every picture you see.
The fundamental properties of light.
Exactly. Our mission is to give you immediate control over the three big variables: quality, direction, and intensity.
And we have to start with quality, right?
We have to. Because understanding the physics of hard versus soft light is, it's the biggest single step you can possibly take.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Hard light. When I hear that, I think drama.
You should. Think sharp, really defined shadow lines, super high contrast.
And it comes from a light source that's small compared to the subject.
Right. Like the sun at high noon. It's just this tiny, harsh spot in the sky.
And it emphasizes everything. Every wrinkle, every pore, every flaw.
Yeah, it's not very forgiving. But see, the physics rule you have to know is that softness is all about relative size.
So to get soft light, the opposite, you just need a bigger source.
A physically large source. Think of a huge overcast sky, or maybe a big light bounced off a white wall.
And that's the universally flattering light.
It is, because those large sources create these gentle, feathered shadows that just kind of wrap around the face. It smooths out texture almost instantly.
Okay, so that's the key takeaway right there. Large source equals soft, flattering light.
That's the main rule.
So now that we've handled quality, we need to decide where to put it. Let's talk direction.
Yeah, and this is what dictates whether your subject looks flat or three-dimensional.
We can basically boil it down to 3 placements, can't we?
Pretty much. First, you have front light. So the light is straight on.
And that just obliterates all the shadows.
It does. It's useful for, scanning documents, but for a person, you get that classic flat driver's license photo.
The one nobody likes. Okay, so to fix that, you move the light to the side.
Exactly. Side light is what creates dimension. It carves out the face with shadows.
It reveals texture and depth, so if you want drama, you pull the light to the side.
You do. And then there's the third one, backlight.
Right. Positioning the light behind the subject.
And you get one of two really powerful effects from that. Either you get a striking silhouette,
or if you expose for the person, you get that beautiful halo of light around their hair.
That halo, yeah. It's perfect for separating your subject from the background.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Our third property, intensity. This one is about light fall off, and the rule here is, it's genuinely surprising.
It really is. We're talking about the inverse square law. Now, most people assume that if you, say, double the distance of your light from your subject, the power drops by half.
Yeah, that seems logical, linear.
But it's not linear at all. If you double the distance, the power of that light decreases to 1/4.
1/4, wow.
It's a huge drop.
So practically speaking, what does this mean for you when you're setting up a shot?
It means that light falls off incredibly quickly.
So if your light is just a little too bright on someone, you don't need to fiddle with the power settings on the flash.
Not at all. Just move the light back. Even just a few inches can drastically, and I mean drastically, drop the intensity because of that fall-off rate.
So when you put all three of these together, quality, direction, and intensity,
Mm.
you're not just taking a photo anymore.
No, you're sculpting with light. You're designing the visual impact from the ground up.
Okay, so to recap our deep dive, soft light needs a large source to be flattering. That's rule one.
Right.
If you want to reveal texture and create depth, use side light. And never, ever forget that tiny changes in distance cause huge shifts in light intensity.
Exactly. And that raises a final, maybe a provocative thought for you to carry into your day.
Okay.
Now that you know these laws, just look around. Look at the sharp little shadow cast by a streetlight tonight. Then compare it to the soft light coming through a huge window on a cloudy day. And ask yourself, which light source is truly bigger in relation to the object it's hitting? And why does the shadow look the way it does? Once you start seeing that, you see the world completely differently.
All right, so today we're doing a deep dive on something that I think trips up every photographer, natural light. Specifically, how to master something that is, fundamentally out of your control.
It's the biggest constraint there is, isn't it? I mean, when you're outside, you can't exactly move the sun.
Right.
So all you can do is move your subject around or, well, you wait for the whole planet to turn.
So our mission here is basically to treat the Earth's rotation like a giant dimmer switch.
Exactly. A very, very sophisticated one.
Okay, let's start with the one everyone wants, the gold standard, the
Right.
golden hour.
Ah, yes.
That hour right after sunrise or just before sunset, why does that light look so good, so warm?
It's just physics, really.
Yeah.
When the sun is that low right on the horizon, its light has to travel through way more of the Earth's atmosphere to get to you.
Okay.
And that journey, well, it scatters all the short, cool blue light waves away.
So what's left over is just the warm stuff.
All the reds, the golds, saturated and soft. And because the angle is so low, you get these incredible long shadows that just carve out the landscape.
Adds all that depth.
For portraits, for landscapes, it's just perfect.
That makes perfect sense. So if the long trip through the atmosphere gets rid of the blue, what happens when the sun is totally gone, below the horizon?
Then you get the opposite. You enter the blue hour.
Its complement. Okay.
Yeah, it's that really short, kind of magical window just before the sun rises, right after it sets. There's no direct light, just the glow from the sky.
And it creates that deep indigo look.
Deep indigos, rich blues. It's pure mood.
So where do you use that strategically?
Oh, cityscapes. 100%.
Oh, of course.
You get this cool, moody blue canvas in the background, and then, boom, all the warm street lights and the lights in the windows start to pop against it.
It's that warm, cool contrast.
It's instant trauma.
But let's be real, we can't always shoot then. We have to face the enemy,
Yeah,
the midday sun.
the worst.
Just harsh, contrasty, and usually very unflattering. What is it about that overhead light that's so bad for faces?
It creates this one specific terrible problem. Photographers call it raccoon eyes.
Raccoon eyes, okay.
Yeah, because the light is coming straight down, your subject's forehead and brow ridge cast this really dark, ugly shadow right in their eye sockets.
And you lose all the light in their eyes.
All of it. All the sparkle, the detail, it's just gone.
So if you're stuck shooting at noon, what's the fix? How do you fight it?
The first, and honestly the easiest thing to do, is find what we call open shade.
Just get out of the direct sun.
Exactly. Move your subject into the shadow of a big building or under a tree, anything. You're not getting rid of the sun. You're using the building to turn that hard light into a huge, soft, ambient light source.
So the building becomes your diffuser.
It becomes your giant natural softbox. It's brilliant.
And what if there's no shade? You're in a field, nowhere to hide.
Then you bring your own shade.
Yeah.
Use a diffuser. It's basically just a translucent white sheet you hold over your subject. You're literally creating a small artificial cloud that softens that light before it hits them.
And that gets rid of the raccoon eyes.
Instantly.
Okay, so quick review. The checklist. Golden hour, warm, soft light, perfect for people and landscapes. Blue hour, cool, moody tones, amazing for cities.
Right.
And midday sun. You avoid shooting faces if you can, but if you have to, your first move is always to find open shade.
Always.
So that's the playbook.
Yeah, and it raises a really interesting thought, the fact that our own atmosphere scatters light to create these beautiful colors. It's kind of an illusion. Makes you wonder how many other fundamental truths about the world are just things we can learn to work with or even master once we understand how they work.
It's not about the presence of light, but the quality.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, just pay attention to the quality of the light around you. You'll start seeing these things everywhere. All right, let's jump right in. For this deep dive, we're going to unpack what is basically the secret weapon for great photos when, the sun just isn't cooperating.
Artificial light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our mission today is pretty clear. Figure out the two main kinds, and maybe more importantly, expose one really critical technical trap you have to avoid.
Right. And it all boils down to two main families of tools. You've got your continuous light, which is always on. Think of a lamp.
Like a video light.
Just like that. And then you have flash, or what people call a strobe or a speed light. That's that quick, powerful burst of light.
So let's start with the continuous light. It seems like that's the easiest place to get your feet wet.
It is. The learning curve is much, much shallower.
Because you get that WSIYG acronym,
Yeah.
right? What you see is what you get.
Precisely. You can see the shadows, you can see the highlights, all before you even take the picture. It makes it fantastic for beginners and, well, essential for video.
But there has to be a trade-off.
There's a huge one. Power. Continuous light is, well, it's generally pretty weak. If you try to take it outside on a sunny day, you're just not going to have enough juice to fight the sun.
You'll lose that battle.
Every time.
So that brings us to flash. Why would anyone deal with something more complex?
One word. Power. Just raw, incredible power. That is the main advantage of a flash.
We're talking about a small, battery-powered unit being brighter than the actual sun.
For a tiny fraction of a second, yeah. Maybe 11,000th of a second. And that huge burst of energy, it also perfectly freezes motion. That's why it's a must-have for studio work.
But the challenge with that is you're flying blind.
Right.
You can't actually see the light until after the photo's taken.
That's the steeper learning curve. You only see the result after the fact. Unless, that is, your flash has a little modeling lamp.
Which is really just a tiny, weak, continuous light built in to give you a preview.
Exactly. Just a little hint of where the shadows will fall.
Okay, so this is where we have to connect that immense power to the camera's own mechanics.
Yeah.
Because that burst comes with a really serious speed limit.
It does. We have to talk about sync speed.
The big trap.
This is a hard physical limitation of your camera. Most of them can't use a standard flash with a shutter speed any faster than, say, 1200th of a second. Some go to 1250th, but that's about it.
So what happens if you don't know that and you set your camera to, 11,000th to freeze some action?
You get a disaster, a big, ugly black bar across half of your photograph.
And that's because the shutter is literally getting in the way.
It is. The flash fires, but the shutter curtain is already closing before the light has finished hitting the whole sensor.
So part of your picture is just black.
Total darkness. Now, there is an advanced way around this. It's a feature called high-speed sync, or HSS.
But it comes with its own catch, doesn't it?
It does. Instead of one big, powerful burst, HSS makes the flash pulse very, very rapidly, almost like a continuous light. But all those little pulses add up to a lot less power overall.
So if we just boil this whole deep dive down for everyone, what are the key takeaways?
I'd say there are three.
Okay, 1, constant light is easy to learn. It's WISIWYG, great for video.
Check. 2, flash is incredibly powerful and freezes action perfectly.
But it has a steeper learning curve. And 3, and this is the big one, never, ever go faster than your camera's sync speed, that 1200th or 1250th limit with a standard flash.
Or you'll get those black bars. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Mastering this is really all about balancing that raw power against your camera's physical speed.
It's a choice.
It's the fundamental choice. When you build your setup, you have to ask yourself, do I need to see the result instantly, or do I need enough pure power to bend the light to my will? That's the balance you have to strike. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a bit of a shortcut.
A very necessary one, I think.
Yeah, straight into the world of professional lighting. We're going to be talking about modifiers.
Right. The tools that fix that, that brutal, hard light you get from a bare flash bulb.
Exactly. The things that turn it into something beautiful, something controlled.
That's the whole mission here. We're
Yeah.
giving you a shortcut to understanding the tools that shape light, how to change its size, its shape, its direction.
Okay, so let's start with the most fundamental idea, right? Size equals softness.
That's the #1 rule.
Which brings us straight to, I think, the first thing everyone buys, the softbox.
Mm-hmm. And its job is really, really simple when you think about it.
It just takes a tiny, harsh light source
Yeah.
and makes it big.
It makes it effectively huge.
Yeah.
And that is what gives you that beautiful, soft, almost window-like quality of light.
Now, for portraits specifically, people always talk about the octabox, the 8-sided one.
Yeah, and there's a good reason for that. It's all about the reflection in the subject's eye, the catch light.
Ah, so a round reflection looks more natural than a big square one.
Exactly. Looks more like the sun. It's a small detail, but it really matters.
Okay, so if a softbox is about precision, what about an umbrella? They seem a lot faster.
They are. And you basically have two kinds. There's a reflective one, where you bounce the light off the inside.
Off a silver or white interior. Yeah.
Or you have the shoot-through, which is just translucent white fabric you fire the flash through.
But that one's kind of a light grenade, isn't it?
It is. It just throws soft light absolutely everywhere. Lots of spill. Which is fine sometimes, but it shows why you need to move from just coverage to, well, control.
Right. From making light big to making it small and focused.
And for that, the simplest tool is the snoot.
Which is really just a tube.
It's just a tube. It physically funnels the light down into a tight, hard circle, a spotlight.
Okay, but here's a question. What if you've set up your big softbox? You love that soft light, but it's spilling all over your background.
That is the perfect problem for the grid to solve.
The honeycomb thing you put on the front.
Yep. The grid doesn't change the quality of the light. It's still soft. What it does is it forces all those light rays to travel straight forward.
So it stops the light from fanning out.
It completely kills the spill. So you get a focused beam of soft light just on your subject. Super dramatic.
All right, let's talk about the tool that doesn't even plug into the wall. The reflector.
Oh, the 5-in-1? Probably the most useful piece of gear you can own.
And the cheapest.
Absolutely. You use the light you already have. The silver side bounces a hard, cool light.
Punchy.
Very punchy. The gold side, that gives you warmth, like a sunset. And the white is just a really nice, soft, neutral fill light.
But the real pro secret on that thing is the black side.
That's the one. Negative fill.
Because it doesn't add light.
It does the opposite. It takes it away. It actively absorbs light. You put it just next to your subject on the shadow side, and it eats any stray bounce.
So it makes the shadows deeper.
Way deeper. It creates contrast and drama just by subtracting light. It's an amazing tool.
So the key takeaways for you are pretty straightforward. The softbox makes your light source bigger, which makes the light softer. The grid is what you need to control the spill from that soft light and aim it.
And the reflector gives you all that versatility for bouncing light, but especially that black side for creating powerful contrast.
Right, by taking light away.
And, you know, we've spent this whole deep dive talking about adding light, how to fill in shadows, how to soften things.
Yeah, the whole conversation has been about addition.
But the most dramatic moments, they often come from using that black side, from actively subtracting light to increase that drama. And that raises a really important question for you. How often is removing or subtracting an element more effective than adding one?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to get into something really foundational for almost all visual media.
Right. From photography to film.
We're talking about the three-point lighting formula. It's the standard for sculpting a subject, and our mission today is to really unpack why the lights go where they go.
It's all about purpose.
So let's begin with the absolute essential, the main source.
The key light.
The key light, exactly. Its main job is setting the exposure, but it's really about defining the subject's shape, isn't it?
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And its position is not random. You'll always hear it's 45 degrees to the side and a bit above the subject.
And there's a reason for that specific angle.
Yeah, we're basically mimicking the sun. That diagonal placement gives you the most dimensionality. It creates what we call shaping light.
So anything straight on would just look flat?
Totally flat, like a passport photo. It just kills the shape. This way, you establish a clear shadow axis down the face.
Okay, so we have shape from the key light. But that immediately creates a new problem, right? You get these really deep, heavy shadows on the other side of the face.
Right. Trailing off the nose, the cheekbone. It can be very harsh.
So how do you manage that darkness? How do you soften it without, destroying the shape you just worked to create?
And that is the entire job of the fill light.
Ah, the second pillar.
It sits opposite the key, but it's important to know it doesn't even have to be a lamp.
It could just be a reflector.
Exactly. A white card will do it. Its only goal is to control that contrast ratio, to lift those shadows so they're not just pure pitch black voids.
And the power of that fill is really where the mood comes in.
That's everything. We talk about it in ratios. A 2-to-1 ratio where the shadow side is half as bright as the key side gives you a soft, high-key look.
Which you see in, comedies or commercials.
Tea-time TV ads, yeah. But if you dial that fill way down, say to a 3-to-1 or even 4-to-1 ratio, you get that dramatic, low-key lighting.
Think film noir.
Or The Godfather. The fill is basically your drama dial. You turn it up or down to set the stakes.
Okay, so we've defined the face and we've set the mood. But the subject can still feel stuck to the background.
Yes, they can merge, especially if you have similar tones.
We need that final bit of dimension, that pop.
And this is where the third light, the rim light, is so crucial.
Sometimes called a hair light or a backlight.
Right, but its real technical name is the rim light.
Yeah.
Because its purpose is pure separation.
And where does this one go?
You put it behind the subject, high up, and aim it at the back of their head and shoulders.
Creating a kind of glowing outline.
A rim of light, exactly. It physically carves them out from the background. Without it, a person with dark hair against a dark wall just becomes a floating face.
It makes them feel truly three-dimensional.
It's absolutely essential.
And you've done all that. You've got your key at the right angle. Your fill is setting the perfect mood. There's one last little detail you're looking for. The mark of mastery.
Ah, yes.
The Rembrandt triangle.
It's the classic litmus test, isn't
yeah.
it? It's named after the painter, of course.
And it's that small, perfect triangle of light that appears on the shadowed cheek.
Right under the eye. If you see that little patch of light, it's confirmation. It means your key and fill are working in perfect harmony. You've got shape, you've got depth, you've got mood.
So for you listening at home, it's really a 4-point checklist to use when you're watching anything. First is the key light setting the shape.
Then is the fill controlling the shadows and setting the mood.
Third, does that rim light create that 3D separation, that pop?
And finally, can you spot that little Rembrandt triangle on the cheek?
It changes how you see things once you know what to look for.
And that actually raises a final interesting thought. What happens when a storyteller chooses to break this formula?
To deny one of the lights.
Yeah. How does using just one or two lights fundamentally change the truth of what we're seeing? Lighting is a narrative choice. And choosing to use fill, or not use it, is how you define the dramatic stakes of a story before anyone even says a single word. Okay, so we've got this fascinating stack of research here on what the pros call posing mechanics. And our mission today is to basically cut through all the noise. We want to give you the foundational principles.
The cheat sheet.
Exactly, the cheat sheet for looking amazing in photos. Guaranteed.
And you know, the first thing that jumps out from all this is that the biggest hurdle, it isn't you, it's the camera.
That's a huge relief for probably everyone listening.
It is. The core idea is there's no such thing as unphotogenic. There's only unposed.
I love that framing.
Because the camera is, well, it's a thief. It sees our world in 3D, but it captures a flat 2D image.
Right, so if you just stand there face on...
You become a block. The camera just flattens you. So every single rule we're about to talk about is really just a way to trick that 2D lens into seeing depth and shape again. The whole solution is learning to create visible shape.
Okay, so shape is the key. And the most common one, the one we see everywhere for a more feminine archetype, is the S-curve. The goal there is, what, curves and asymmetry.
Curves and asymmetry, exactly. It's all about breaking up that straight line.
And the main technique to do that is actually... It's surprisingly simple. It's just shifting the weight.
It is. It's pure physics, really. You just ask the subject to put, say, 90% of their weight on their back foot.
And that one move does what?
It automatically pops the front hip out.
Yeah.
That creates a natural curve in the waistline and makes the front leg look longer. It instantly creates that S shape.
That makes so much sense. And once you have that, the sources jump right to the next rule. Creating gaps. We've talked about the dreaded flattened burger arm.
Oh, yes. When you press your arms flat against your body, you're essentially making yourself look wider and hiding your waist.
So the trick is...
Always create a visible gap of air between your arms and your torso. A little lift, a bend in the elbow, a hand on the hip, anything.
That gap defines the waist and uses shadow to slim everything down.
It's the difference between looking defined and just looking wide.
Okay, but wait. That S-curve is all about asymmetry. Not everyone wants that look. What if the goal is strength, stability?
Then you pivot completely. You stop chasing curves and you start building width and angles. We're talking about the masculine archetype here, the C shape.
Which starts with the stance.
It does. Feet should be shoulder width apart, maybe even a little wider. You're anchoring yourself. And you square your shoulders to the camera to maximize that sense of size.
And to make that powerful stance feel more engaging, you add the lean, They sometimes call it the turtle technique.
Yeah, that's the one. It sounds a little funny, but it's a subtle but really powerful tilt forward from the neck.
And what does that do?
Two things. First, it stretches the skin under the chin, which really defines the jawline. And second, it gives the whole posture this forward engaged energy. You look alert, not passive.
Now, here's where it gets really practical, because there are some rules that seem to apply to everyone. Let's talk about joints. The rule's pretty simple. If it bends, bend it.
Absolutely. Think about it. Locked knees, straight elbows. It looks rigid, uncomfortable. A slight bend in the elbows, the wrists, the knees. It implies movement. It implies life.
And that sense of life is tied to posture. The sources have a great visual for this. The string from the crown.
I love this one. Just imagine a string is pulling the very top of your head straight up to the ceiling.
And that simple thought.
It elongates your neck, it drops your shoulders, and it instantly improves your presence in the frame. It's your vertical line.
So to wrap this up, if you remember nothing else from this deep dive, here's your checklist.
Yay.
First, never stand on 2 feet equally. Always shift your weight. Second, always separate your arms from your body to create that gap of air.
Critical.
And finally, always think about your posture with that string from the crown image.
And that leaves me with a final thought for you to consider. If all these mechanical rules are just about making you look more natural and alive for a photo, what other subtle asymmetrical movements could you bring into your daily life?
Beyond just a photo session.
Exactly. In your handshake or how you stand in a meeting. How could you use these same ideas to project confidence and engagement even when there's no camera in sight? All right, so today we're diving deep into something I think everyone wants to know about, visual direction. Specifically, how photographers use these tiny little adjustments in angle and light to completely change how a face looks in a picture.
Yeah.
We've basically distilled years of portrait advice into 3 things you can use right away. Okay, let's unpack this.
You know, what's fascinating is that every single one of these pro techniques, they all start from one basic observation.
Which is?
Perfect facial symmetry. It doesn't exist. Every single face is asymmetrical.
So one eye is slightly different or one side of the jaw is sharper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not a flaw. It's the starting point.
Yeah.
It's what you work with.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. But how does a photographer find that, that good side quickly without just asking the subject?
Well, there's a really simple trick for this. You just direct their focus. You ask them to look straight at you. And then you slowly move your finger from side to side, and you watch how the light hits them as their face turns.
And what are you looking for? What are the cues?
You're looking for concrete things. The side where the eyebrow has a slightly higher arch, or where a cheekbone seems to naturally pop a little more when it catches the light.
So you're maximizing the definition they already have.
You've got it. That's the foundation.
So once we've locked in that angle, then we bring in the light to do the sculpting. And this gets us to broad versus short lighting.
Right, and this is probably the most critical concept for making a face seem wider or slimmer.
Let's start with broad, the widener.
The widener, yep. You'd use this if you want a thin face to look a bit fuller. With broad lighting, the subject turns their face away from the light source.
Okay, so the side of the face that's closer to the camera gets lit up.
Exactly. You're illuminating the largest visible area of the face, which gives it more visual mass.
But the flip side of that is short lighting. Here's where it gets really interesting.
This is the one. This is that classic Hollywood contoured look.
And the setup is just the reverse.
It's that simple. The subject turns their face toward the light.
So now the side closest to the camera is
in shadow. All that light is hitting the far side of the face, so you only see this sliver of light. It just hides the cheeks and carves out the face instantly. It's dramatic.
We've got the angle, we've got the light for width. Okay, last piece, jawline definition. We all know the camera can flatten things out, and you get that look where the chin and the neck sort of merge.
Yes, the solution for that is something we call the turtle move.
The turtle move. I'm guessing it feels as awkward as it sounds.
Oh, it feels very unnatural for the subject. You ask them to just push their forehead forward and maybe a little down.
Like a turtle just starting to peek out of its shell.
That's the one. To them, it feels strange, but to the camera, it's profound. That little movement stretches the skin on the neck just enough.
And it creates that clean, sharp shadow under the jawline.
A razor-sharp jawline. No Photoshop needed.
So what does this all mean? When we boil it all down, you've got 3 really powerful tools. Find that best angle first by looking for those physical cues. Then use short lighting for that slimming, defined look. And finally,
the turtle move.
Yeah.
Always the turtle move to separate the chin from the neck.
Right.
This raises an important question, though.
Go on.
If a slight head turn, a change in light, and a tiny posture shift can so fundamentally change how we perceive someone's face,
Yeah.
what assumptions are we making when we look at any professional photo?
That's the real takeaway here, isn't it? It's understanding that you, with a camera, aren't just capturing reality, you're actively shaping it. You have control.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something that is, I think, one of the most nerve-wracking parts of any creative's job.
Oh, for sure.
How to actually direct another person.
Right.
How to guide someone who is clearly uncomfortable into giving you a real, compelling portrait.
It's all psychological, isn't it? We're looking at that moment a camera's pointed at someone and they retreat.
Right, they go behind what our sources call the mask.
Exactly. It's that immediate feeling of being judged, and it causes them to freeze up. You get that tight, forced smile.
Yeah, that's the one you make when you accidentally turn your camera on during a video call. We all know it.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And our goal today is to figure out how to break that mask.
Okay. So if the problem starts with this internal pressure,
Mm-hmm.
the fix has to begin with something external, with nonverbal cues. Which brings us to the first technique, mirroring.
Mm-hmm. And the science here is really simple. We just unconsciously mimic the physical posture and expressions of people around us.
We copy them.
We copy them. So the biggest mistake you can make is trying to hide behind your camera.
Which is so counterintuitive, because that's where you feel safe.
It is, but it doesn't work. If you want your subject to, say, tilt their head to the left, you can't just say it. You have to tilt your head to the left.
You physically demonstrate it first.
Precisely. If you're just standing there staring blankly, they'll mirror that blankness right back at you. You want a genuine smile. You have to be genuinely smiling.
It's like a silent signal that it's okay to relax.
Exactly.
So, okay, we've used our body to give some physical direction. Now for I think the really high stakes part, the actual words we use. Why does that classic instruction, smile, why does it fail so spectacularly?
Well, because it's demanding an outcome without giving an emotional trigger.
Right.
The person tries to force the muscles in their face to make a smile shape.
And the eyes are just dead.
The eyes are dead. There's tension. So we need to swap that direct command for a psychological cue.
Right, this is the core difference. So instead of the bad command, smile, your sources suggest an emotional prompt like, think about the funniest thing your toddler did this morning.
And that gets an immediate involuntary response. You get the crinkled eyes, the lifted cheeks. That's a real, genuine joy.
And what's fascinating is how this applies to really abstract concepts, too. Like, the instruction, look sexy, is just, it's unusable.
It's a recipe for pure awkwardness.
So what's the cue for that? How do you get around it?
You don't direct the emotion. You direct a simple physical process. You say, take a deep breath in through your mouth and just relax your lips.
So you're focused on a tiny physical action, not this huge emotional state.
And that process, the slight parting of the lips, the soft jaw, it automatically communicates a lure without making the subject try to act sexy.
So once you hit that sweet spot, you have to sustain it. Because silence is the enemy, right? They immediately think, I'm doing it wrong.
Absolutely. That's when you have to, as the source puts it, feed the ego.
You need that positive reinforcement loop.
A constant stream of it. High energy affirmation. Great. Beautiful. Yes, hold that. Perfect. That energy is what keeps their confidence up.
And even if you need to adjust them, you never criticize. You never say, that looks bad.
Never. You'd lose all the momentum. The script has to be framed as an exciting new option. Okay, we got that one. Now let's try this instead.
So let's boil this all down for you. Here's a quick checklist to break the mask. 1, use mirroring to give those silent physical cues. 2, ditch the smile command. Use emotional prompts to get a genuine reaction. And 3, affirm constantly. You have to feed the ego to sustain that confidence.
And if provoking a genuine reaction requires these specific psychological cues instead of just blunt commands, it does raise a bigger question. How might applying these nuanced verbal triggers, instead of just blunt instruction, how might that improve your communication in other high-stakes, personal or professional situations? Outside of photography. That's definitely something to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into your notes on group dynamics.
Right.
Specifically, how to pose people so you can turn these really static pictures into something, dynamic.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The first big roadblock your notes flag. is this sort of human default setting.
The firing squad.
The firing
Good.
squad, yeah. We just instinctively line up, shoulder to shoulder. All the heads are at the same height.
And it just kills the energy. It's visually monotonous.
Completely.
So, yeah, our mission here is to give you 4 core techniques that can signal connection and strength and help you get past that simple straight line.
I think the biggest rule, and maybe the most counterintuitive one for beginners, is this immediate focus on the triangle. Your notes cite it as the #1 compositional solution. Why is the triangle so strong visually?
Well, what's so powerful about it is that it provides stability, but it also directs the eye. It moves it around the frame instead of just letting it scan a flat line.
Oh.
So if you're working with, say, 3 people, the rule is absolute. Never, ever put their heads at the same height.
So you need that variation.
You need it.
Yeah.
You get that by having one person standing, maybe one sitting, one leaning in. And the crucial detail, the thing you have to look for, is the line connecting their noses.
Ah.
If you draw an imaginary line between their noses, it has to form a clear triangle.
But wait, what if the group is huge? 15 people? Do you still try to make a triangle?
Absolutely. The triangle just scales up. For a larger group, you're basically building a pyramid.
Okay, a pyramid.
It's made of lots of overlapping triangles. You find little clusters of 3, and you make sure the whole structure has varied heights and depth. No more flat headlines.
That sets up the physical structure, but, a perfect structure can still feel cold. Your notes were so emphatic here, everyone must be connected.
Yes, because a photo just looks distant if no one is touching.
So how do we actually show that emotional warmth visually?
It really comes down to physical contact.
Yeah.
A hand on a shoulder, holding hands, or even just bodies leaning together. That signals a shared identity, trust.
And if it's a formal group where touching might be inappropriate?
Good question. You look for substitutes. A shared gaze, maybe? Or having bodies lean inward toward a central point, even if they're not touching.
Okay, so that's composition in 2D. Now let's shift to 3D. Your notes introduce this idea of layering.
Right. Using the front to back space, not just left to right.
And this is how you turn that flat wall of people into something with real dimension, isn't it?
Exactly. The classic example is a family photo. You could place the kids sitting on the floor in front.
In the foreground.
Yep. Then the parents standing just behind them, and maybe the grandparents a step behind them. It makes the group feel cohesive and, properly three-dimensional.
That depth is a huge visual win, but it creates a pretty big technical problem for the camera, doesn't it?
It does.
Your notes had this aperture alert.
Yes, because using a wide aperture, something like f1.8, is so dangerous when you layer people.
Explain that for people who aren't familiar.
Sure. An f1.8 gives you a really, really thin slice of sharp focus. We call it a shallow depth of field.
Perfect for one person.
Perfect for a solo portrait. But the moment you layer people, the person in the back row is going to be blurry. Guaranteed.
So what's the fix for that?
You have to increase your depth of field. To make sure everyone is sharp foreground, middle, and back, you have to stop down your aperture.
To what specifically?
Use f4 at a minimum. But really, you should be aiming for f5.6 or even f8. That guarantees everyone in your pyramid is tack sharp.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The key takeaway seems simple. Break the straight line.
Immediately.
Use that triangle structure for a solid composition, and always, always make sure there's some kind of connection to signal warmth.
So here's a final thought. If a triangle is the strongest shape in composition, what common group structure, beyond that firing squad line, maybe at your next family reunion, or that stiff company photo, are you going to restructure first? How will you make sure every nose connects to that larger pyramid? All right, so let's dive right in. The very first, and maybe the most critical decision you make in your camera's menu.
RAW versus JPEG.
Exactly. It's the one setting that dictates literally everything about how much control you'll have over your final image.
It really is. It's control versus convenience, And our sources, they all circle back to this one perfect analogy.
The finished cake versus the ingredients.
That's the one. JPEG is the finished cake, and RAW is just the ingredients.
I love that. So when you pick the cake, the JPEG, you're basically telling the camera, you do the work for me.
Right. It takes all the sensor data, it applies contrast, a little saturation, some sharpening.
And then it compresses it.
And this is the key part. It throws away data it thinks you don't need.
Just to make the file smaller and ready to go. But once it's baked, it's baked.
It's final. If the sky is blown out too white, that detail is just gone. You can't, like the source material says, take the sugar out of the cake.
Okay, but then why would any professional ever shoot in JPEG? If RAW is so much better, what's the trade-off?
It's all about speed, just pure speed of delivery. Think about sports journalism or breaking
You need
news.
the photo on the wire in seconds. No time to edit.
Exactly. But for pretty much everything else, that finality is a massive, massive penalty.
So if JPEG is all about finality, RAW is the complete opposite. You get this file that honestly looks kind of boring at first.
Oh, it looks terrible. It's flat, it's gray, it has no punch.
Because it's just the data, right? It's the ingredients.
Hmm.
So what does that mean when you, say, mess up a shot? Like it's way too dark.
That is the big aha moment for anyone new to RAW. You can take a section of the photo that is pitch black,
But completely black.
and you can lift the shadows and just reveal all this detail that was completely invisible in the JPEG. It feels like magic.
And that also means you can totally mess up your white balance in the camera and not even worry about it.
Totally. You can change the color temperature from like a warm tungsten to a cool daylight with a single click perfectly. It's impossible with a JPEG.
So this flexibility, it's not magic. It's just,
Okay.
it's math.
It's math. It comes down to something called bit depth, and that's the real technical advantage here.
Okay, so let's get into that. Why does a JPEG sunset look so terrible when you try to edit it with those ugly stripes?
That's called banding. And it's because we're comparing two completely different scales of information. A JPEG is an 8-bit file.
Which is what, about 16 million colors? Sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot, but a modern RAW file is usually 14-bit. We are talking about over 4 trillion potential color values.
Whoa, okay. 4 trillion versus 16 million.
That's the whole game. When you push the tones in a JPEG, the math just runs out of steps. It can't create a smooth gradient. But with RAW, with trillions of values, the transition is perfectly smooth.
So to bring this all together for you listening, the advice is pretty clear.
Yeah, if you want quality and control, you shoot in RAW, period.
You'd really only shoot JPEG if getting the image out instantly is more important than getting it perfect.
It's that simple. Instant sharing versus, well, mathematical flexibility. But that flexibility comes with a cost. You have to process it.
And that's really the final thought for you to chew on. Since every single RAW file demands that extra step in post-production, you have to ask yourself, is the guaranteed path to a perfect image worth that mandatory time commitment? Or in a world that moves so fast, is good enough right now actually good enough? All right, so today we're diving deep into what is probably the biggest time sink for anyone in a creative field: information overload.
Oh, for sure. Whether it's photos, research, notes, anything.
Exactly. So our mission today is to look at the process of finding, the 10 great photos out of 1,000. We're talking about the art of killing your darlings.
And the material we're looking at defines culling in a really interesting way. It's not just about picking the best. It's about finding the best. And this is key, aggressively deleting the rest.
I love that. And it sets up the one non-negotiable rule right at the start.
Which is never, ever edit a photo or polish an idea until you are completely done culling.
Right. Because if you spend hours on something, you're invested. It's the sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly. But if you do the hard selection work first, editing becomes the reward. It's the prize you give to only the very best stuff.
Okay, so let's unpack the actual system here. The material lays out a 3-pass structure. If you've used software like Lightroom or Capture One, you'll know the star or flag system.
Yeah, it's a way to categorize things really fast. It helps you move from instinct to intellect and then finally to strategy.
So let's start with that instinct. Pass 1 is called the gut check.
And this is where perfectionists are going to struggle, because the goal here is pure speed. You have to go through everything at lightning speed.
Key instruction here: do not look at sharpness. Don't zoom in. If a photo or an idea makes you feel something, anything, you flag it as a pick, a 1-star. If not,
You skip it instantly. No second thoughts.
but wait, why not check for sharpness? I mean, wouldn't that save you time on blurry photos right away?
Because it shifts your brain from feeling to analyzing, and that slows you down.
Ah, I see.
You want to find what has emotional resonance first. If a photo doesn't move you, who cares if it's technically perfect?
Okay, that makes sense. So after that first gut check, you filter your view. You only look at your picks.
And now we get logical. This is pass 2, the technical check. Quality control kicks in.
This is the famous zoom check.
Yeah.
You go into 100%. You look at the critical focus, like the eyes in a portrait.
Is it sharp where it matters? Is the exposure something you can actually work with?
And if it meets those technical standards, and only then you upgrade it to a 3-star, a keeper. If not,
It's gone, deleted, no matter how much you loved the feeling of it in pass 1.
oof, ruthless. And that brings us to the final act of discipline.
Pass 3, the story check. So now you have a folder of technically perfect, emotionally resonant keepers.
But you might have 5 great photos of the exact same pose or, 3 arguments in a report that basically make the same point.
Redundancy. It just dilutes the impact. You have to choose the single best one.
That's the real kill your darlings moment.
It is, because one truly great photo is so much better than 10 okay variations of it. This is the final strategic edit.
So the checklist for you listening is pretty clear. First, call everything before you edit.
Trust your gut for that first pass.
Then, enforce a strict technical check. Use that zoom. And finally, be absolutely brutal about getting rid of duplicates.
And I'd challenge you to think about this beyond just photos. Where in your own work are you wasting time polishing 5 versions of the same okay idea? Does forcing that speed in the initial gut check actually stop you from falling in love with a concept that's, fundamentally flawed from the start? That selection first mindset, well, that's the real key. Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the very first thing you should do when you open a photo, global adjustments.
Right.
And when we say global, we just mean the big foundational changes that affect the entire image at once. We're setting the stage.
Exactly. And our whole mission here is to give you a really solid 4-step workflow for that basic panel. You need it because remember, the raw file you start with, it's supposed to look flat.
It's designed to look flat.
Yeah, to hold all that information.
Yeah.
So we need a sequence to bring it to life properly.
And the sequence is pretty rigid. It's exposure, then white balance, contrast, and then finish with highlights and shadows. But hold on, why so strict?
Well, think about it. Exposure has to be step 1. It's the overall brightness of the entire image.
And you have to be looking at the histogram for this, right?
You absolutely have to. The histogram is your best friend. It's just a little graph showing you all the tones, and you're just making sure you're not clipping, losing all the detail in the pure blacks or pure whites.
Okay, so once the brightness is nailed down, then we move to color, white balance.
Precisely. This is where you fix that overall color cast. When someone's skin looks a little too blue because they're in the shade?
Or way too orange from weird indoor lights.
That's it. You neutralize the whole image right then and there, because you can't judge contrast accurately if your colors are off.
Which brings us to step 3, contrast. Since we started with that super flat raw image, this is where we finally get to, punch it up a bit.
Punch it up is a good way to think about it. But really, you're defining the relationship between the light and dark parts of the photo. It only works because you already set your correct brightness and neutralize the color. This is what makes it look real again.
And now for my favorite part, step 4. This is where it gets really interesting. The balancing act with highlights and shadows. So you're doing 2 opposite things. First, you pull down the highlights slider. You're trying to rescue detail in the brightest spots.
Like the texture on a fluffy cloud or the lace on a wedding dress.
Exactly. So it's not just a big white blob.
And then on the flip side of that coin, you're lifting the shadows. You're trying to bring out the detail hidden in the dark spots, like the texture in a dark suit or, some of the leaves on trees in the shade.
And when you do both, pull down highlights, lift up shadows, that's what creates that famous HDR look, right?
It is. But this is also where you need to be really, really careful. Restraint is everything here.
Oh, for sure. Because you can go from a nicely edited photo to something that looks, completely artificial really fast.
And that artificial look can bleed right into your colors, which actually brings us to a huge trap.
Yeah.
Saturation versus vibrance.
Okay, let's talk about this because everyone wants more color. So you see that saturation slider, you push it up and disaster. What's the danger?
The danger is that saturation is, it's dumb. It boosts the intensity of every single color equally.
And that's bad for skin tones.
It's terrible for skin tones. It takes any reds and oranges that are naturally in the skin and just cranks them to 11. It makes people look like, Oompa Loompas. It's the fastest way to ruin a portrait.
So vibrance is the answer. It's the smart tool here.
Always the answer. It's so much smarter. It analyzes the photo and mostly boosts the more muted colors like the blues and greens while actively protecting the skin tones. It knows not to make people look orange.
So for portraits, it's not even a question. Always vibrance.
Always. So if you're going to take away just 2 things from our deep dive today, let it be these. First, master that order of operations. Exposure, white balance, contrast, then highlights and shadows. Every time. The rule is simple. Always choose vibrance over saturation. Just do it. Your photos will thank you.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with. If these global adjustments are the foundation of your edit, what level of restraint do you need in that final highlights and shadow step to make sure your photo looks naturally dynamic and not like an artificial, overcooked HDR image? Something to think about. All right, so let's jump right in. We're doing a deep dive into lesson 6.4, which is all about local adjustments. And this is where you really move past the amateur stage, right? We're talking about editing just one specific part of a photo.
Exactly. And it's a huge shift in philosophy. You're not just fixing a photo anymore. You're actually editing the path the viewer's eye takes through the image. You're controlling their focus.
Okay, I get that, drawing the eye. But wait, why not just use a preset vignette? What's the real professional difference with something like a custom radial gradient?
It's all about the fall off. Preset vignette almost always looks harsh, aggressive. With the radial gradient, you draw your own circle, you shape your own spotlight, and then, this is the key, you invert it.
So you're only affecting what's outside the circle.
Right. You just gently lower the exposure on the perimeter. You get this buttery smooth transition, and you avoid that hard edge that just screams, I edited this.
That makes sense. That's for the subject. But then there's the environment, and for that, the linear gradient, the line, seems brilliant for just balancing a scene.
Yeah, and this tool solves probably the most common flaw you see, which is a sky that's way too bright. You just drag it down from the top, and you can lower the exposure, maybe boost the blue saturation.
And the effect just fades out.
Just fades out like a ramp. So you stop it right at the horizon. You get a really dramatic sky, but you haven't touched the ground. The foreground stays perfectly lit.
So gradients handle the big, broad strokes. But what if the issue is smaller? Like just one eye or a tiny piece of trash in the corner? That's when we have to start painting, right?
That's exactly it. You move to the brush tool, and you get into the real art of it, dodging and burning. It's just a subtle way of painting with light and shadow to create a 3D shape.
I mean, this goes all the way back to the physical darkroom. It sounds time-intensive. Is it really worth that extra, say, 15 minutes on an image?
Oh, it's the difference between a flat photo and one that feels like it has real dimension. You use dodge, that's painting with light, to brighten the catch lights in the eyes, make them pop. Then you use burn painting with shadow to maybe darken a distracting exit sign in the background.
So you're guiding the viewer without them even noticing.
You're guiding them, and you're adding depth.
Okay, and that brings us to the last one, and it's probably the most powerful, the spot healing brush, the digital eraser.
And this is where we have to talk about the ethical line, because this tool, it forces a professional choice. In portraiture, in commercial art, you're expected to remove a blemish or a stray hair. But in photojournalism, the source material is very clear. It is absolutely forbidden.
The context of the photo dictates the tool. That's a huge takeaway. Okay, so if you're building a checklist from this, what are the core ideas?
I'd say there are three. 1, use your local exposure to strategically draw the viewer's eye.
2, use gradients to balance big elements like the sky and the ground.
And 3, you master dodging and burning to create that subtle but critical sense of 3D shape.
That checklist feels like a big step. And the source notes that this lesson kind of completes the academic part of PHO 101. You've covered physics, art, the darkroom, all for the static image. So now that you know how to control a still photo, what happens when the next step is VD 201, when things start to move?
Well, think about it. We've just mastered controlling light in a single fixed moment. But now imagine applying those rules: composition, light, depth across 24 frames every second. If light tells a story in one photo, what story does it tell when the light itself starts moving through time? That's the next challenge.